let's talk about discovery of Uranus and Neptune. So that's something that's been in the news recently, based on Planet X or Planet 9, depending if you want to call it that. But if you want to actually understand Planet X's backstory, well, you have to actually look at the discovery of Uranus and Neptune, or also Pluto. So let's actually talk about it. So let's backtrack a little bit. So for thousands of years, we've learned how to discover different areas based on direction. And this is the time before maps, satellites, and Google Maps, before all the technology. So basically how you make maps with all that stuff, you basically connect the dots with little stars, and then just it will point you in a direction based on if you follow the stars as you're looking up. We have something like the North Star, Polaris. And then we have, if you're following west, you're following east, you're following south. And as you follow the stars, depending on what direction you're going on, it's like a little compass. And then you keep tracking along later. And then you had things like shipping, trade routes with other parts around the world. And that kind of where Christopher Columbus starts. So Christopher Columbus wants to start a trade route with India, with all the spices and sugar and gold and spices and all that stuff. So the quickest way that he said you went from Spain to India is like going west. But everyone didn't know there was something. Nobody knew there was something in the way before you cross into the next ocean. And then because no one knew about North America nor South America or anything like that. So there was something no one knew there was something in the way. So he was discovering west. So he was sailing west, following the stars, until he found himself on, Hispaniola. And then jumping forward, 1500s roll by, you had Copernicus. And this is where everyone thinks that the Earth was the center of everything. So, and that's kind of where the expression that everything revolves around you. So that's pretty much where that term comes from, because everyone thought the Earth is the centermost of everything. Like everything orbits around the Earth, until later where people say, hey, it's the other way around. The Earth orbits around the sun. And our solar system orbits around a galaxy. It's that way. So eventually, we had things like technology at the time. So 1600 or so. We have Galileo discovering Jupiter and the rings. And we had, and also the moons as well. The four main Galilean moons with the telescope. And then, as advancements of technology, we can go much further out into the abyss of space. So eventually, we're going to roll into the late 18th century. We're going to talk about William Herschel, a British-German astronomer who accidentally discovered Uranus. Well, it actually wasn't named Uranus at the time, so he was out one night, just looking up in the abyss of his telescope, and what he saw was just a pale blue dot streaking across his lens, right over there. It's kind of irregular. He noticed that something was just trekking along in a weird path. It was a pale blue dot. So, he gave it a name. So he named it after his predecessor, George. The George I'm referring to is King George III. And mind you, this is 2 years before the American Revolutionary War ended. So, this was named after, so it's Georgium Satis, George's star, after King George III. So, he discovers this planet, and he realized during the time this is Newton's laws. So Newton's laws only went so far. So he noticed that Newton's laws can only go so far. So Uranus wasn't following Newton's laws in its orbit, and this is due to calculations. And over time, as you keep exploring. So you notice something. Why is not following Newton's laws? Well, there must be another planet out there. So there was a hunt for finding that other planet. Until years and years later, we had other scientists. You had Urban Leverrier, Laplace, John Couch Adams. You had Johann Gale. And then you had Heinrich d'Arrest. You had other astronomers from different areas and backgrounds around Europe at the time. And then pretty much calculations upon calculations, and noticing there's other objects that don't follow Newton's laws. So with all these calculations, he noticed that there was something as well that he discovered that Leverrier and other people in his field were looking at something that was a mystery, not knowing that there was another planet out there. And right now, so Leverrier communicated his findings to Berlin Observatory, where John Gale and Heinrich d'Arrest confirmed that Neptune was discovered on September 23rd of 1846 due to basics of calculation and astronomy. So that's kind of, but realizing that all the calculations following Neptune were also don't follow Newton's laws. And they noticed that. So we take all the calculations to other scientists, and they always kind of laugh at them and say, hey, all these are wrong. And, there's a lot of things that when you're discovering the calculations of its orbit, some of these might be wrong because you're giving the wrong distance, you're giving the wrong size, you're giving the wrong mass, not knowing that they discovered that was something right there. Neptune was laying under their nose the whole time. Until, like I said, Neptune was discovered September 23rd of 1846 because of all these calculations and the observing. They can discover them themselves. That's where, like I said, Neptune was laying under their nose the whole time. So, if you follow the Newton's laws and you see how far it can go, after Neptune was discovered, that's where the whole obsession with Planet X became something. They discovered, well, how long can Newton's laws keep going? Because both Uranus and Neptune are not following that stuff. Well, there must be another planet that's disturbing the orbits of Uranus and Neptune. It wasn't until Lowell came around and he built himself an observatory in Arizona, and it is known as Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona. So, it wasn't until 1930, this is during the Great Depression. So, Lowell himself, so he builds this observatory, and then Clyde Tombaugh discovers a teeny tiny object streaking across his lens with those little telescopes that he was calibrating. And just a teeny tiny dot with little clusters of other areas, of little stars and other objects around it. And that was the discovery of Pluto. Well, at the time, you were always getting asked, how big is the object? What's its mass? And what's its distance? Well, not knowing that Pluto was very tiny, and it's about the fifth the size of the Earth, and it follows a very irregular orbit because it's so elliptical, and the orbit tips 17 degrees outside of the plane of the solar system. Well, and then we figure out what's disturbing the orbit of Pluto and Uranus and Neptune. There must be another planet out there. So pretty much the whole obsession with Planet X or Planet 9, or however you want to discover it, started in about 1781, and then the discovery of Neptune on September 23rd of 1846 due to calculations. So all of these beyond planets that are just so far out were based on the discovery of calculations, pretty much. And remember, this is during the late 18th all the way into the mid 19th century, and then now following it with the 21st century, it's still going on to this day. So who knows what's out there? Planet X could be somewhere. We just don't know, because the entire orbit of Planet 9 or Planet X takes about 10 to 20,000 years. So 10,000 to 20,000 years to make one full, complete orbit around the sun. But who knows where in its orbit is there. So with all the calculations, and they said, hey, you know, all these calculations that we're getting right, but there's nothing there beyond Neptune. Well, until Pluto came around. Then Pluto was demoted in 2006 because it didn't meet any criterias. But then it's discovered, well, all the more calculations we're going to keep going with. You know, they landed with nothing. There wasn't really anything that's out there. Planet X is somewhere different. But, you know, wherever Planet X was, it's not even there. So all these calculations, I think we need, like, advanced calculations to discover where Planet X could be. So I'll see you guys in the next video.